What's good, YouTube? Welcome back. Thank you for clicking onto this reaction. I hope you're looking forward to it just as much as I am. If you haven't already, head over to the content creators page. That link is in the description box down below. If you haven't already and you're enjoying our content, you know what you need to do. You need to like, comment, subscribe, hit that notification bell, but we're going to jump straight into this one. Imjin War, beginning of the Japanese invasions of Korea. Let's go.
After the Sengoku Jidai, the all-out war between the Japanese clans came to an end. It became clear to the winners that Japan would need to find another target for the hundreds of thousands of warriors now roving around the shattered country. Toyotomi Hideyoshi united the country for the first time in over a century. Now that he could harness some of the most veteran armies in Japanese history, he would launch a devastating invasion of Korea. Welcome to the new Kings and Generals series on the Imjin War, which our patrons and YouTube members selected to be covered next.
What you got in store for us, Kings and General?
Hideyoshi's dream to unite Japan into one nation was almost a reality. He had claimed Honshu in its entirety after succeeding his betrayed master, Oda Nobunaga, in 1582. Shikoku was subdued in 1585, and Kyushu fell soon after in 1587. However, like Nobunaga before him, Hideyoshi believed that his power ought to extend beyond the confines of his small island nation, and was convinced his destiny was to conquer further afield. The rival daimyo who swore to follow Hideyoshi were allowed to keep their domains and were promised more lands and spoils as the land of the rising sun came ever closer to unification. This was precisely the problem. As with no more battles to fight or
where were they going to get the extra land?
They would surely begin to plot and scheme against Hideyoshi. Aware of this fact, he began to make his plans in the late 1580s, hungrily eyeing Korea as the initial target and the Chinese Ming Empire after that.
What would have happened if they had successfully invaded and got a foothold on Korea, do you think? For a long period of time, do you think they would have been able to go further?
Great Unifier's most recent conquest was the island of Tsushima, located at the midpoint of the Tsushima Strait. The lords of this clan, the So, now became Hideyoshi's vassals and were ordered to deliver a message to the Koreans. It was a threat of invasion that put the So in a difficult spot. So's long relations with the Korean Joseon monarchy made them ideal diplomats, but the outbreak of hostilities would damage the trade which granted the clan much of its wealth. Aiming to soften the diplomatic blow as much as he could, So Yoshishige altered Hideyoshi's message to the Korean court. It now demanded that a simple tribute mission be sent to Japan in order to confirm Korea's respect. In a lethal blunder, the So clan leader sent a rough, hardened subordinate known as Yutani Yasuhiro to deliver the message instead of going himself. Yasuhiro offended his Korean hosts by insulting the size of their spears compared to the Japanese and mocking their lifestyle. Not content with that, the brash envoy warned, "Your country will not last long."
I mean, what are you doing here? You're only going to antagonize them.
Having already lost the sense of order and discipline, how can you expect to survive? The uncouth nature of the envoy's conduct, in addition to the unacceptable terms of Hideyoshi's edited letter, led to the Koreans' refusal. Naturally, Hideyoshi was furious at the failure and ordered that Yasuhiro and his entire family be killed. So Yoshishige,
savage. Absolutely savage. That's so peak. I bet he wish he had kept his mouth shut now.
And was punished less severely, being deposed as daimyo of Tsushima by...
Even he got deposed, even though he killed the person. That's so peak, man. Make sure you do your job real. A real diplomatic charm. Offensive right there. Yeah, exactly.
His adopted son, Yoshitoshi, who Hideyoshi considered more trustworthy. Over the next few years, more embassies were sent from Japan to Korea and vice versa. In a crucial visit to Kyoto during 1590, Korean courtiers failed to gather intelligence on just how powerful Hideyoshi's military was, leading their government to underestimate the imminent danger. Furthermore, the issue divided the Korean court factions, named for the location of their respective headquarters in Seoul. Members of the Westerner faction gradually came to realize the very real peril Japan posed, but any attempt to prepare for the invasion was actively opposed by the Easterner group.
What? They just didn't see the threat of the
In
Japanese.
Japan, a colossal war machine was gearing up in the summer of 1591, beginning with Hideyoshi's establishment of a massively fortified headquarters complex on the island of Kyushu. From there, he oversaw the levying of a massive army comprising 335,000 total troops, 158,000 of which would cross to Korea itself.
Still,
The levies were raised
158,000 is a lot, but the original 335,000, that's outrageous.
by the individual daimyo, who were obliged to supply a predetermined number of men according to the size and wealth of their fiefdom in a system known as gunyaku. However, it is notable that other political factors could influence a daimyo's required contribution, such as their standing with Hideyoshi.
I see.
The 158,000 strong invasion force consisted of 82,200 men from Kyushu, which was closest to Korea, 57,000 men from Honshu, and 19,600 from Shikoku. How this giant force was equipped must be discussed for a moment, as it's often common to envision Japanese armies as something different to reality. Rather than an army of samurai wielding katanas,
a lot of them used halberds, didn't they? It was only like nobles who were considered and elites who were considered samurai. So it was a lot of halberds and archers, right?
majority of Hideyoshi's invading troops were instead the humble ashigaru, peasant foot soldiers armed with swords, spears, and bows. As the high-tech spearhead, Hideyoshi used a considerable number of lightweight arquebuses, but the exact number of troops who possessed one is not known, perhaps one-third. The plan itself was to be a domino rolling through Asia. When the Koreans were conquered, they were to supply manpower and material for the push into China. When the area around Beijing was conquered, that area would supply manpower for a push further into the Middle Kingdom, and so on. The invading force would be ferried to Korea by 700 assorted ships, which, along with their crews, were requisitioned from the various daimyo of the coastal provinces. These were mostly repurposed merchant or civilian vessels.
I see.
Though Hideyoshi had a massive army at his disposal, in addition to high-quality military technology on land, naval power would prove a problem for him throughout the coming conflict. The Koreans had just two advantages over the Japanese.
Oh, we can meet Admiral Yi in this series from the Korean side.
Their superior shipbuilding and cannon technology. In addition to their relative lack of knowledge of European-style firearms that the enemy possessed, corruption in Korea was rampant, leaving military units neglected, untrained, and lazy. The kingdom was not ready for the storm that was coming, but one appointed...
It had so many possibilities for a good infrastructure, but the corruption also sort of took it down a couple of pegs. This is where the legend of Admiral Yi was, perfect. A true naval legend. He did seem so. I'm looking forward to finding out some information,
was made,
seeing how Kings and Generals cover it.
A 46-year-old career soldier, Yi Sun-shin, was promoted to command the navy of Jeolla province. After being assigned to Jeolla in late 1590, Yi immediately understood that his province could serve as a possible invasion route. Determined to be as prepared as he could, he spent a year diligently studying naval command, whipping his men into shape and repairing infrastructure.
By the infrastructure, does he mean more so ports, or the actual infrastructure of his domain?
After being delayed multiple times, 3 contingents of the first wave were ready to set sail by May 22nd. On the 23rd, 18,700 troops under the command of Konishi Yukinaga and So Yoshitoshi set out for Busan. The warships earmarked to guard the troop transports had not arrived, and so this fleet was completely vulnerable.
Oh, but it
Though
wasn't
initially
destroyed though,
believing
right?
the ships on the horizon were part of an abnormally large trade mission, the Korean commanders in the Pusan region immediately came to realize that the invasion had begun.
They allowed them to cross
the
already.
superior warships under their command to assault the undefended Japanese fleet, but they failed to do so. By
What a blunder by the Koreans.
nightfall on May 23rd, around 400 transports crowded the waters of Pusan. The fleet rested that night in the harbour, completely unopposed. After a final demand for an unopposed Japanese crossing to China was rejected, the landings began. At 4 AM on May 24, 1592, 5,000 men under Yoshitoshi disembarked onto the land, followed by another 7,000 under Yukinaga. Eventually, the entire first contingent was on land, and a Japanese army had landed on Korean soil without a single shot being fired.
Wow.
After 2 brief sieges, the main fortress at Pusan and its harbour fell, triggering panic among military leaders in surrounding provinces.
Yeah, I mean, they've come in and they've just bulldozed over one castle. You'd be worried if you had
Instead of acting decisively,
under control of another one.
Korean naval commanders scuttled their sizable provincial fleets and destroyed their weaponry and provisions, retreating north as quickly as they could.
Which you would. You'd be shitting yourself.
With Pusan secured, proud Yukinaga would not wait for reinforcements as instructed. Instead, he immediately pushed north along the middle of the peninsula on May 26th, marching at a blistering pace. This daimyo either wished to monopolize the glory of seizing the capital for himself, or may have been anxious to break out of his beachhead before a counterattack.
I reckon it was a bit of both. He definitely wanted some glory, and also you want to get out of that beachhead as well.
Force first came to the deserted town of Yangsan, then went on to Miryang and Taegu on May 28th, conquering and plundering as they did. Realizing he had to mount...
Well, by deserted, I assume they mean just no military presence. It was still probably like a peasant presence.
Some opposition, the governor of Gyeongsang province, Kim Su, tried to lead a force south to meet the Japanese. However, he soon withdrew without fighting after learning that Dongnei had also fallen. News of the Japanese invasion had reached Yi Sun-shin in Jola on May 25th. He remained confident that the Japanese could be defeated on the seas despite their superiority on land, so Yi was biding his time.
Okay, smart Yi, smart.
Meanwhile, the 2nd Japanese Army landed in Pusan on May 28th under the command of Kato Kiyomasa. The troopships this time disgorged a fearsome contingent of 22,800 soldiers. Realizing that the vanguard under Yukinaga had not waited for him, the irritated Kiyomasa also swiftly pushed forward. He took the eastern route, seizing the cities of Ulsan, Gyeongju, Yeongcheong, Singyong and Kumo on the path to Seoul. It would not be his rival Yukinaga, but he who reached the capital first.
Because I'd imagine that the first guys brought too much attention onto him, so they've obviously coalition to take him out, so which has made the opportunity for the second commander to go straight to Seoul.
To the south, Hideyoshi's 3rd contingent under Koroden Nagamasa arrived at Angulpo on the 29th. This force consisted of 11,000 troops who would take the western route north after seizing the nearby fort at Kimhae.
Okay.
3 Japanese armies were now set to converge on the Korean capital at Seoul, but they would not get to the city totally unopposed.
There were parts of the proto-beginnings, if you will, Imperial Japan. What do you mean by that, Bruno?
Revered Joseon General Shin Lip had assembled a sizable resistance army of 8,000 at Chengju, around 100 kilometers south of the capital, and he intended to fight. The ragtag agglomeration of cavalry troops, officers who had retreated from the south, and hastily raised levies from the north, possibly could have held the Cheoyong Pass, General Shin's original plan. However, retreating Korean units revealed that it had already been lost, and instead Shin chose to do battle at Chenju on an open field.
On an open field, really?
At midday on June 6, 1592, as the Japanese were descending from the Choyong Heights, General Shin drew up his army outside Chenju on a stretch of flat ground, hemmed in by a hill called Dagum-dae to their flank and the South Han River behind them.
So he's hoping that he won't be able to get flanked by the mountain pass and he won't be able to get
This was
reared.
a death trap with no possibility of retreat, and
this
was precisely the point.
He also, I'm assuming he also didn't want to get outflanked as well,
Placing
right?
troops in this kind of situation was a long-established Chinese military tactic which had led to remarkable victories in the past. Perhaps the Koreans could use it to halt the robbers, as they derisively called the Japanese.
Forcing the men to stay there until the
As
very end.
Yukinaga's first contingent descended from the heights, Kiyomasa emerged from the eastern route and managed to catch up with his rival daimyo near Chenju. The latter was angered that Yukinaga had stolen the glories by storming ahead and demanded to now take the lead with his own force. He refused, and Kiyomasa decided that he would take revenge on his rival at Chenju. As Yukinaga began his advance
In what way?
towards
Why
the
are you
city
taking
from the
revenge?
southeast, the second contingent stayed behind, hoping their rivals would be defeated.
It's so irritating when fucking generals bicker between themselves and just absolutely waste people's lives. Like it's a fucking game. Irritating. Fuming. Oh yeah, I see what you're saying, Bruno. Like Japan started to invade other nations beforehand. They didn't venture military out of their islands. Yeah. I am struggling today, guys. I apologise. I've knocked this mic over 4 times and I apologise for your ears.
The attacking troops fanned out as they approached the town, finally emerging opposite General Shin's force in a vast arc. At 2 p.m. in the afternoon of June 6th, Yukinaga divided his army into 3 main units. 10,000 soldiers, under himself and his retainer Matsura Shigenobu, formed the vanguard, while So Yoshitoshi and his 5,000-strong contingent formed the left flank. Finally, 3,700 assorted troops commanded by their minor daimyos, Arimaharu, Omura Yoshiaki, and Goto Sumiharu, were placed on the right.
Okay.
Arquebusiers were placed on the front lines of the Japanese army, while behind them stood Ashigaru footmen armed with melee weapons.
So where's the vanguard?
When arrayed in battle formation, the Japanese advanced with a roar of musket fire. It was hardly even a contest. General Shin's amateur forces were almost immediately overwhelmed by flying arquebus balls and began to suffer devastating losses.
The other question I have is how normal was it for these Korean soldiers to see musket and bullets, gunpowder? Did they see gunpowder weapons before, or was this a complete and absolute shock for them? That's my question. Many of these men had been enemies of each other before, obviously due to the Sengoku Jedi period, they all hated each other. But at the same time, it's really, really annoying. Cheers for staying, Bruno. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll catch you later, my man.
The peasant soldiers began to rout under the pressure, but the brave general would not retreat so easily. He led his crack cavalry in a headlong charge towards the enemy line. It was to no avail. The arquebusiers rained withering musket fire down on his horsemen, breaking the charge before any contact was made. In short order, General Shin's 8,000-strong army had ceased to exist, many survivors of the initial slaughter being hunted down by pursuing Ashigaru soon after. Shin threw himself into a natural spring adorned in full armor, committing suicide by drowning.
Fucking hell, he knew he was so disgraced. So disgraced. That's absolutely insane. The Japanese just rolled through the Koreans in this first battle.
Japanese armies had advanced hundreds of miles into Korean territory in under a month. Allies seemed nowhere in sight. and the only significant defensive army had been crushed. It looked as though the Joseon Kingdom was finished, but the war was just starting, and in the next episode we will see mounting Korean resistance, so make sure you are subscribed to our channel and have pressed the bell button.
Well, what a great episode. What a great episode indeed. Should we jump onto another one, or should we do the Kings and Generals Alexander series? I'll tell you what, we're actually going to jump onto the Kings and Generals Alexander series. We're going to jump onto that reaction, and then I think we'll jump onto another reaction. You will see the best admiral in history. Yeah, Admiral Yi. I've heard that Admiral Yi is absolutely amazing. I think I watched the extra credits series on him a couple of years ago, maybe, before I started reacting. So I do remember bits and pieces, so I'll be looking forward to seeing how Kings and Generals cover it. What do you guys want? Do you guys want me to jump onto the Kings and Generals Alexander series, or should we jump onto another episode of this?